where are we serious and where are we not? I mean, this is the Musk problem. Every time I mention Bitcoin, people mention another coin. I'm trying to take it as seriously as possible. And I feel like that there are people who don't get the seriousness of the topic, or maybe the people who feel like, if Musk likes it, anything goes. I mean, where do you come out on Doge?
Yeah. So, well, here's the really, really crazy thing, right? Is I'm a huge believer that like the meme is the message. And so one of the most effective ways to communicate with a very large portion of the internet population today is via these memes and GIFs and all this stuff. And so the easiest manifestation of that is literally I can put a picture with some words on it or whatever, and you and I laugh, but you get the message, right? It's kind of like a good joke, right? There's a hint of truth and a great humor to it. But what I think that we're starting to see is, well, what happens when those memes are financialized? So what's the difference between Dogecoin and GameStop? Well, some people may say nothing. Other people will say they're two completely different things, right? But what you're starting to see again is you're seeing that when you democratize access and you start to break down that walled garden for markets, and you say to people, it doesn't matter if you have a lot of money. It doesn't matter if you're, wear a suit and tie to work every day. Anyone in the world with an internet connection can play the game. You get all kinds of weird stuff, right? And some people just say, look, I like the stock, right? As Roaring Kitty said, or you get Elon Musk who thinks that Dogecoin, he just likes it. Okay, great, right? And so he goes and he tweets about it. And so I think we got to be, we got to be cautious, right? We don't want people to, especially with large audiences, to kind of lead folks to the slaughterhouse. But at the same time, there is an element of this is entertainment, right? And so what's the difference between going and buying a lottery ticket or buying Dogecoin? I don't really know if there's much, right? Other than the education or the state gets paid in the lottery, and in Dogecoin, they don't get paid very much, right? But other than that, I think that a lot of this stuff, it's just pure entertainment. And so you got to let people have fun. And at the end of the day, what do they say? Over a long period of time, the market's a weighing machine, right? We're going to end up figuring out what actually has value and what doesn't, but experimentation is important.
But I mean, should I be on a StockX? I mean, should I be trading sneakers as part of an asset some sort of store value? I'm not laughing, by the way. I know they've got value.
Here's what I would say, right? Is if you look at a traditional 60-40 global portfolio, I literally think you could take your cash and your bond position and throw it out the window. And so now you got a bunch of liquidity, right, in your portfolio that you say, what do I do with this? And sure, you can keep piling into the stock market and buying more of the same assets, but you're just getting more and more concentrated. So you want some diversification. Yes. And so I think people are buying some Bitcoin, right? Which obviously you started to talk about. But I think that they're also looking for other types of alternative assets. And in some crazy way, like, timber used to be this crazy idea, like, well, we're going to buy timber, and that's an alternative asset. Well, now that's a pretty well accepted, especially in the institutional world. Like, that is something that people will do. Well, I actually think that every institutional investor one day is going to be buying alternative assets, but they're going to be buying sports cards. They're going to be buying sneakers. They're going to be buying all this stuff because, again, it all comes back to scarcity. And when you live in a world where it is impossible for the Federal Reserve and elected officials to stop devaluing the currency, and they have their hands tied behind their backs, they can't raise interest rates, you ultimately are going to have this flight to safety, but safety gets really, really big aperture because people are saying, wait a minute, I can't hold just real estate. I can't hold just stocks. I got to get other stuff. And, look, there's all kinds of crazy stuff people are buying. Some of it will be worthless. Some of it won't be. But I just think that there's a generation who they want the sports cards. They want the digital art. They want the sneakers, right? And so who are you and I to say that they're wrong? I don't know.
Look, right? I'm reading a tremendous book called Titan. And it's the biography of John D. Rockefeller. And he was the richest man. And he figured out that kerosene, that oil was going to have tremendous scarcity value. People couldn't even figure out what it was going to be used for. He had already decided that it was going to have scarcity value. So he buys every refinery in Cleveland. And people don't understand why he's buying any of it because it makes no sense because people can't even envision, well, what the hell is he going to do with it? And then, well, what did he do with it was he basically cornered one of the most important markets in the world. But right now, there'd be you and me, which we're Rockefeller and Flagler, which was his buddy. And they would be talking about the need to own all the oil in the world because there's only so much oil. And other guys would just say, here, take my oil for 100,000. And it was worth 100 million. But they said, take it for 100,000. Sometimes I feel like Bitcoin. Take it for 6,000. I am so thrilled to get rid of it. All the people who sold the refineries for 100,000 thought they did great. They all thought they did great. They would be names on buildings and hospitals and schools, but no, they thought they did great. And they thought they did great because they did not have the creativity that you had to take a look, or what Rockefeller had, to realize, you know what, this thing may have tremendous value. And a lot of people laughed at Rockefeller. He was a kind of a cranky guy, but he had a vision. And it was a vision that the stuff that was in a western part of Pennsylvania, where no one was willing to go, was worth a great deal. And, you and I are talking about this, and I do feel like it's Cleveland right after they decided, you know what, maybe it can be used to light things up. They hadn't thought about anything else. And imagine, maybe we are, like you talked about, maybe we're going to be in a virtual room, like Jensen Huang has told me at NVIDIA. Listen, Jim, one day maybe you go into a room and you're alone, but you want to talk to 5 people who love Mozart. Boom. I'll give you the 5 who love Mozart. Now, just like you also said, there's going to be people who use it for evil. We have to be sure that doesn't happen. But right now, our minds are our limiting factor. And I find older minds really have to be careful, because they're the ones that were ruined in Weimar. They were the ones that were ruined in Zimbabwe. And when I say ruined, I mean literally, they thought they had a lot of money. And it turned out that they didn't. And it's not necessarily any different from what you and I are talking about right now. We all may have thought before the government prints $4 trillion that we had a lot of money, but maybe we don't. And we don't have oil. But we can buy if you're at Square. I mean, I am most appreciative of anyone who watches this and says, well, listen, I see Bitcoin at X, but I can go into Square on my Cash app and I can buy some, put some every month, put some away. I think you'd probably be appreciative of someone trying to do that.
Absolutely. So you bring up John Rockefeller, and one of my favorite stories about him is obviously he gets in a little issue with a lot of the guys who run the railroads. And what is probably one of the smartest things that he ever did was then he said, "Well, I'm just going to use a pipeline. I'm going to literally create pipelines. I'm going to push the oil there, and I'm going to go around your railroads, and you can kick rocks." So I think that again, innovators innovate, right?
Yeah, screw you.
Absolutely. So innovators innovate. But here's an idea for you that I think the world hasn't yet woken up to, that when I sit back and I say, what's a secret that investors, if they start to wrap their head around this, will start to change the way they invest, is we talk a lot about commodities, right? We talk about oil and right, all kinds of other commodities. But actually the world's most valuable commodity, right? And if you go back to Cleveland and people realizing that this kerosene and oil was going to be so valuable before everybody else's, computing power is the world's most valuable commodity. And so ultimately, what Bitcoin is backed by is the world's strongest computing network, right? Yes. It is backed by the strongest commodity in the world. It's the largest kind of computing network commodity in the world. And so I think that what we're starting to see, and it's starting early, right? There's still a lot of people that wrap their head around this, is if you start to think of computing power as a commodity, and then you start to say to yourself, well, who owns the pipes to the computing power? Well, Jeff Bezos and AWS are doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. The Bitcoin network is backed by the strongest computing network in the world. It's $1 trillion asset now, right? And so you start to look around and say, where's the computing power, right? Where's that pointed to? Who's providing it? Who's the underlying infrastructure that's making that possible? I think that whole world and that whole economy and industry is going to get really, really interesting.
The pipes.
But there's another piece of it that gets me even more excited, which is if you look at some of these companies like Great American Mining, and there's a whole slew of them, what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to connect that old commodity world to the new commodity world. So they go out to the oil and gas guys and they say, hey, you guys are killing the environment. You guys are flaring all this gas out here. And it's one of the most harmful things you can do, but you're doing it because you found oil. What if we could actually capture the flare gas and we could turn it into power on site, and we could mine Bitcoin right here?
Whoa.
And that's what they're doing, is they're literally powering Bitcoin mining equipment on site at the oil and gas wellhead. And they're capturing flare gas and they're mining, because all you have to do is have an internet connection in these machines.
All right. I just stop for a second. All right. So I'm meeting with the CEO of Coca-Cola. And I said, how much you paying for the carbon dioxide? He tells me a price. I said, I got an idea. Why don't we take all the carbon dioxide that comes out of the wells when they drill, and we'll send it to Coca-Cola? Here's the way I'm thinking. I'm thinking about a soft drink. You're thinking about Bitcoin. And that is the difference. But you see, after this interchange, I know enough with the CO2 and the Coca-Cola. You've got an idea that is brilliant. And it's like if I pick the Darren Woods tomorrow at Exxon, I'm going to say, what the hell? Why can't you diversify like this? Or to
every company, every single company in the world that has any sort of power generation is going to do this because the financial incentive is way too high. Every day right now, Bitcoin miners are paid like $50 to $55 million all around the world every day. Right. So we're talking about, billions and billions of dollars in terms of annual revenue to Bitcoin miners. Right. But the beauty is that you don't have to go buy equity in a miner to get that exposure. If Exxon said, hey, you know what? We got a lot of gas flaring going on. We got a lot of access to power. Why don't we just buy some of these computers, plug them in, and then we'll start to get our own fair share of that revenue? You would see that not only are these companies going to have what a lot of people are referring to, like Michael Saylor would refer to as a treasury strategy. Right? How do I go ahead and buy Bitcoin and put it on my balance sheet and kind of use that to protect my shareholder value? But also what they're going to start to say is, wait a second, I need a P&L strategy. How do I actually participate in this economy and drive revenue and profits off of this? And so I think that ultimately the financial incentive for this system is going to be incredible. It's just that people are uneducated yet. They haven't spent the time. Right? If you're running an Exxon, that's the last thing in your mind is, how do I mine Bitcoin? Over time, though, that changes.
Like Rockefeller. You just got to think like Rockefeller, who was this bumpkin, but he had thoughts like this. He wouldn't be rolling over his grave right now. He would be saying, you know what? I want to go right now and wring the neck of the Exxon guy that he hasn't thought about it, or worse, that he thinks it's small.
Of course.
That's what the people felt were the refineries. The 27 Cleveland refineries, they thought they were small. But when you took them together, oh, my God. Well, anyway, look, I got to go. Shoot, I got to go I got to go lose money versus make money. You are pure joy.